He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to another Supervillains Explored video. Today, this is going to be the first Spider-Man villain that I've ever talked about. And today I'm starting out strong as far as Spider-Man villains is concerned. I'm taking a look at the Hobgoblin. Yes, without a doubt, one of the greatest of Spider-Man's enemies, but without a doubt, one of the most complicated and confusing origin stories of any comic book character. So I have a lot to talk about concerning this guy, so let's not waste any time. Now, the Hobgoblin's true identity was completely unrevealed for 14 years straight. However, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that the main man behind the mask of the Hobgoblin is a billionaire fashion designer named Roderick Kingsley. And the way he becomes the Hobgoblin is that a couple of goons try to run away from Spider-Man when Spider-Man's chasing them away. One stray goon happens to stumble upon one of the hidden layers that Norman Osborn uses to suit up as the Green Goblin, because back in the 60s, Norman Osborn had several different suit-up locations hidden all across New York City, and this one thug happens to find one. He decides to sell this information to Kingsley, who decides that while this was a good find, he kills the guy who tells him about it because he doesn't want any loose ends to deal with. So, in light of this, Kingsley takes all of Osborn's old equipment, redesigns it, and he decides to create a new goblin identity for himself, and he calls himself the Hobgoblin. In his first encounter with Spider-Man, he doesn't do very well because Spider-Man is considerably stronger than him. Even though all he has is just a bunch of gadgets and weapons, he doesn't actually have the same strength as Spider-Man. So to correct this, he finally discovers the strength-enhancing formula that Osborn has. However, he decides not to use it on himself, but to hire another goon named Arnold Lefty Donovan to basically use it. He dresses up Donovan as the Hobgoblin, and he makes him take the serum. He makes Donovan fight Spider-Man, and it works very much in Kingsley's favor. In order to avoid Donovan revealing Kingsley's name, Kingsley decides to kill Donovan by having the remote control glider explode and murder him in the process. Using a newly composed strength-enhancing formula, Kingsley is finally strong enough to take on Spider-Man himself. When this happens, Kingsley as the Hobgoblin attracts the identity of the Kingpin. A little bit later in the comics, Daily Bugle reporter Ned Leeds stumbles across another goblin layer himself, so Kingsley decides to kidnap Ned Leeds and brainwashes him and makes Ned Leeds believe that he himself is the Hobgoblin, because Kingsley decides he wants to remain completely elusive for as long as he can possibly do it. So Ned Leeds is thoroughly convinced that he is the Hobgoblin, and he decides to declare war on Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, by allying with Wilson Fisk's son, Richard Fisk, who adopts the crime lord name The Rose. Shortly after this happens, Kingsley decides he wants to see some more fluctuating activity, so he decides to frame Flash Thompson for being the Hobgoblin. When When this happens, Flash Thompson is arrested, but then he's later he's broken out of prison by none other than Jason Massendale, aka Jack-O-Lantern, who believes that Flash Thompson is the Hobgoblin. When Massendale figures out that Flash Thompson is not the Hobgoblin, Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin attacks, and this results as the start of a very strong, violent hatred between Jack-O-Lantern and Hobgoblin. Well, Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin, not Kingsley. Kingsley is still working in the shadows behind the scenes. Long story short, Hobgoblin and the Rose pretty much betray each other. Hobgoblin reveals the Rose's true identity to the Kingpin. This results, shortly afterwards, the Kingpin is named the head of crime in New York City. This results in a hyper-violent gang war. Eventually, Hobgoblin and Jack-O-Lantern end up in another extremely brutal fight. Shortly after this, Kingsley decides to reveal that Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin. And when this information is revealed, Jason Massendale, this Jack-O-Lantern, he decides to send an assassin named the Foreigner to kill Leeds. Peter Parker, who is actually alongside Ned Leeds on an assignment in Europe, he returns to his hotel room to find that Ned Leeds is dead. And then he's later told by someone else, the Kingpin in fact, that Ned Leeds was the Hobgoblin. Kingsley is very pleased to see how all these events turn out, so he decides that he wants to retire somewhere for a little bit. When this happens, Massendale himself stumbles across a goblin lair and he decides to become the Hobgoblin. This pisses off Kingsley, so he comes back and he takes up the moniker of the Hobgoblin for himself. Many years later, in a very long series of encounters against Spider-Man, Hobgoblin decides to kidnap Betty Brant, and then something happens concerning Roderick Kingsley's gay brother Daniel. Daniel, who is a minor criminal, is captured by the police and Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man finally tracks the real Hobgoblin down and unmasks him. For the first time, we really get to see who the Hobgoblin really is. Shortly afterward in the comics, Norman Osborn, the actual Green Goblin himself, comes back, and he's pissed off about the fact that there is a Hobgoblin, so he retaliates by completely buying out Roderick Kingsley's company underneath him to spite him, and this ends with a very violent and brutal climactic battle between both the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin. Osborn believes that Kingsley is dead, when actually Kingsley, he finds out that he has a whole stash of cash and funds that he has left over, millions of dollars of cash in fact, so he decides to go and retire somewhere in the Caribbean. Whew, and that is the first Hobgoblin's entire origin. I have to say I'm quite impressed with myself. I'm surprised I was able to recount all that information. Currently, in the comic books, there is a new Hobgoblin, although they have yet to reveal who this new character is. Because it can't be Roderick Kingsley because he's chilling out in the Caribbean and enjoying his life. So we have yet to find out who this new Hobgoblin character is. Hopefully, his real identity won't remain a mystery for as long as Kingsley's was, because Hobgoblin was first introduced into the comics in 1983. And he was created by a guy named Roger Stern. And when Stern left the Spider-Man books, a whole slew of other writers began writing the Hobgoblin, and they kept making all these tweaks to his origin story, and it only became a lot more confusing. And then it was all finally cleared up. A Hobgoblin was first introduced in the comics in 1983, but it wasn't until 1997 that we actually found out who the Hobgoblin really was. I can't think of any other comic book villain whose secret identity remained a total mystery for 14 years. That's pretty damn impressive in my opinion. So that's probably one reason why Hobgoblin is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, is simply because that Kingsley is very good at covering his tracks, and he has proven himself to be a very dangerous and formidable foe for Spider-Man. Okay, that's my video on the Hobgoblin. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it to be informative. Stay tuned for more of my videos. There are only a few more left that I'm going to be doing in this marathon, so keep an eye out.